David Carter's hands trembled as he turned his key in the front door of his Buckhead mansion. The house felt different, too quiet, too cold. He'd flown back from Singapore 3 days early, canceling board meetings that could have cost him millions. Something Simone had said on the phone made his blood run cold. "Your daughter needs you, David. Not your money. You." The Italian marble floors echoed with his footsteps as he climbed the grand staircase, his designer shoes creating a hollow rhythm that seemed to mock him. 20 years of building an empire, 10 years of marriage falling apart, and now. The scream pierced through the silence like broken glass. High-pitched, desperate, and coming from his 8-year-old daughter's room. David's briefcase hit the floor with a crash as he ran, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sound wasn't physical pain, he knew that much. This was something deeper, something that made his soul ache before he even reached her door. "Mommy. Mommy, please don't go." He burst through the pink-painted door to find Naomi thrashing in her bed, tangled in princess sheets soaked with sweat. Her beautiful brown skin was flushed, her thick curls matted to her forehead. Even in sleep, tears streamed down her cheeks. "Baby girl, wake up. Daddy's here." His voice cracked as he reached for her. Naomi's eyes flew open, wide, terrified, and for a moment she looked right through him like he was a stranger. Which, David realized with a punch to his gut, he basically was. "Where's Mommy?" she whispered, her small body shaking. "She said she was never coming back. She said I was too much trouble." David's knees nearly gave out. "That's not true, sweetheart. Mommy loves you more than anything in this world." But Naomi just stared at him with eyes that held too much pain for an 8-year-old. Then why did she leave? Why does everyone always leave? The accusation hung in the air like a blade. David looked around his daughter's room, at the expensive toys still in their boxes, at the designer clothes with tags still attached, at the stack of unopened gifts from his business trips. Everything money could buy except the one thing she needed most. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Japanese investors want to reschedule. Very urgent." For the first time in his career, David Carter turned off his phone without reading the rest. "I'm not going anywhere, baby girl," he whispered, pulling his daughter close. She felt so small, so fragile. "Daddy's home now." But even as he said it, David knew he had no idea how to fix what his absence had broken. He was a man who could move markets with a single decision, but he couldn't stop his 8-year-old daughter from having nightmares about being abandoned. The scream still echoed in his mind, not just the sound but what it represented. His little girl was drowning, and he'd been too busy counting money to throw her a lifeline. Outside, Atlanta's skyline glittered with the lights of his success. Inside, his world was crumbling, and he finally understood that some things couldn't be bought, couldn't be delegated, couldn't be fixed with another acquisition. Some things required him to actually be present. As Naomi finally drifted back to sleep in his arms, David made a decision that would have shocked his shareholders and pleased his estranged wife. He was about to learn what it really meant to be rich. The morning light filtering through Naomi's bedroom windows revealed what David had missed in the darkness. Crayon drawings covered the walls, not the typical stick figures of childhood, but something that made his chest tight. Picture after picture of a little girl standing alone. Always alone. "She draws the same thing every day," came a voice from the doorway. David turned to see Grace Thompson, Simone's mother, holding a steaming cup of coffee. At 55, Grace still moved with the quiet confidence of the teacher she'd been for 30 years. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her dark eyes held a mixture of love and disappointment that made David want to shrink. "Mrs. Thompson, I didn't know you were here. Someone had to be." The words weren't cruel, just matter-of-fact. "Simone called me 3 weeks ago. Said Naomi was having episodes." "Episodes?" David's voice dropped to a whisper. Naomi was still sleeping, curled against his chest like a kitten seeking warmth. Grace gestured toward the hallway, and David carefully extracted himself from his daughter's grip, following his former mother-in-law downstairs. The kitchen, a chef's dream that rarely got used, smelled like bacon and pancakes. Grace had been busy. "Coffee's fresh," she said, pouring him a cup. "You look like you need it." David accepted the mug gratefully. "Where's Simone?" "Hospital. Emergency surgery. A child came in with a heart defect." Grace's expression softened slightly. "She wanted to be here when you got home, but you know how she is about her patients." Yes, David knew. It was one of the things he'd fallen in love with, Simone's fierce dedication to healing children's hearts. The irony wasn't lost on him that she could save other people's children while their own daughter was falling apart. "Tell me about these episodes." Grace sat across from him at the marble island, her hands wrapped around her own mug. Nightmares every night for 3 weeks. She wakes up screaming for her mama, convinced Simone is never coming back. Won't eat unless someone sits with her. Follows Simone to the bathroom, afraid she'll disappear. Each word hit David like a physical blow. But why? Simone would never leave. Grace's eyebrows rose. Son, you've been gone more in the past 2 years than you've been home. Business trips, conferences, late nights at the office. From where Naomi sits, everyone leaves. David wanted to argue, to explain about the Tokyo expansion, the merger with the European firm, the IPO that would secure their future. But looking at Grace's patient expression, he realized how hollow those explanations sounded. She's 8 years old, David. She doesn't understand quarterly reports. She understands that daddy promises to be at her school play and doesn't show up. That daddy says he'll take her to the zoo on Saturday but has to fly to Seattle instead. I was building something for her. For all of us. What good is a fortune if your family falls apart earning it? Before David could respond, small footsteps thundered down the stairs. Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair sticking up at odd angles, still wearing the princess pajamas from the night before. Gamma Grace. She launched herself into her grandmother's arms. Morning, baby bird. Did you sleep better? Naomi nodded, then glanced shyly at David. Is daddy really staying? The question broke something inside him. His own daughter wasn't sure he'd stick around for breakfast. I'm staying, baby girl. I promise. But what about your important meetings? David looked at his daughter, really looked at her. When had she gotten so thin? When had those shadows appeared under her eyes? When had she started talking like she was competing with board meetings for his attention? Nothing is more important than you, he said, and for the first time in years he meant it completely. Naomi studied his face with the intensity that only children possess. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded once, then climbed onto the stool next to him. Gamma Grace makes the best pancakes. Better than the fancy restaurant. Does she now? David smiled, watching his mother-in-law flip perfect golden circles on the stove. Think she might teach me? Grace glanced over her shoulder. Teaching takes time, David. You have to stick around for the whole lesson. It was a challenge, not a cooking tip. David met her gaze steadily. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time since he'd walked through the front door, Grace smiled. It was a small smile, cautious and conditional, but it gave David hope. Maybe he hadn't lost everything yet. Maybe there was still time to learn what really mattered. As Naomi chattered about her drawings and Grace flipped pancakes, David felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The simple pleasure of being exactly where he was supposed to be. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, saw his CFO's name, and made a choice that would have shocked his younger self. He turned the phone face down and didn't check the message. Some lessons he was beginning to understand couldn't be rushed. Simone Carter walked through her front door at 2 p.m. looking like she'd been fighting a war. Her scrubs were rumpled, her natural hair escaped from its surgical cap in tired spirals, and exhaustion painted dark circles under her beautiful brown eyes. She stopped short when she saw David sitting at the kitchen table with Naomi, both of them covered in flour. We're making cookies, Naomi announced, holding up hands white with baking powder. Daddy doesn't know how to crack eggs. I'm learning, David said, his voice careful. He and Simone hadn't been alone together in months, and now here they were, with their daughter as a buffer and years of unspoken resentment hanging between them. How's little Trevor? Grace asked, kissing her daughter's cheek. Good. The surgery went well. He'll have a normal childhood now. Simone's smile was automatic, the one she wore for families in hospital waiting rooms. I need to shower. Mommy, are you leaving again? Naomi's voice went small, the happiness draining from her face. Simone froze halfway to the stairs. Just upstairs, baby. I'm just getting cleaned up. Promise. The single word carried so much weight that David felt it in his chest. This wasn't normal 8-year-old clinginess. This was a child who'd learned to fear abandonment. I promise. Simone knelt down, pulling Naomi close. I will always come back to you. Always. But David saw the tremor in his wife's hands, the way she held their daughter just a little too tight. Simone was carrying guilt that was eating her alive. After she went upstairs, Grace looked at David meaningfully. We need to talk about getting Naomi some help. What kind of help? Professional help. This isn't something that's going to fix itself with cookies and quality time. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. I've already called Patricia Lewis. She's a child psychologist, and she specializes in anxiety and abandonment issues. David's first instinct was to resist. Therapy meant admitting there was something seriously wrong, meant acknowledging that his choices had damaged his daughter in ways that might take years to heal. Is that really necessary? Daddy, Naomi said quietly, sometimes I can't breathe when Mommy goes to work. My chest gets all tight and I can't stop crying. The simple honesty of it broke David's heart. His brilliant, beautiful daughter was describing panic attacks. Okay, he said, his voice rough. Let's call Dr. Lewis. An hour later, Patricia Lewis sat in their living room, her presence both calming and professional. She was a woman who radiated the kind of quiet strength that made people want to trust her with their secrets. Naomi, she said, settling into the chair across from where the little girl perched on David's lap, your daddy tells me you've been having some scary feelings. Naomi nodded, suddenly shy. Can you tell me about them? Sometimes I think everyone's gonna leave me alone, Naomi whispered. Like forever alone. That sounds very scary. It is. And then I can't stop crying and my tummy hurts and I can't breathe right. Patricia nodded seriously, treating Naomi's words with the respect they deserved. Has anyone ever left you alone for a very long time? Daddy goes away a lot. For work. Sometimes for weeks. Naomi glanced up at David's face, then back at Patricia. And Mommy has to go to the hospital at night sometimes, and I get scared she won't come back. But she always does come back, right? Yeah, but what if one time she doesn't? What if something bad happens and I'm all by myself? David felt tears burning his eyes. His daughter had been living with this fear, this constant anxiety about being abandoned, and he'd been too busy making money to notice. Naomi, Patricia said gently, those feelings you're having? They have a name. It's called anxiety and lots of kids have it. The good news is we can help you feel better. You can? Absolutely. And you know what else? Having anxiety doesn't mean you're broken or bad. It just means your feelings are trying to protect you, but they're working a little too hard. For the next hour, Patricia talked with all of them, asking questions that made David squirm and Simone cry quietly into a tissue. By the end, they had a plan. Twice weekly sessions for Naomi, family sessions for all of them, and strategies for managing the anxiety that had taken over their little girl's world. One more thing, Patricia said as she gathered her things. Children Naomi's age are incredibly resilient. With the right support and consistency, she can absolutely overcome this. But it's going to take time, patience, and commitment from both parents. After she left, David and Simone sat in the living room while Naomi played with blocks nearby, close enough to keep both parents in sight. I feel like I failed her, Simone said quietly. We both have, David replied. But Patricia's right. We can fix this. Can we? Simone's voice was barely a whisper. Can we fix us? David looked at his wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, but there was a sadness in her eyes that made his chest ache. I want to try, he said. I want to try everything. Simone nodded, wiping her eyes. She asked me last week if we were getting divorced. What did you tell her? That I didn't know. Simone's honesty hit like a slap. I told her the truth because I really didn't know. And now? Simone looked over at Naomi, who was building a tower with careful concentration. Now I know we have to try. Not for us, but for her. She needs to see what a healthy family looks like. Then that's what we'll build, David said. A healthy family. Whatever it takes. It was a promise that would prove harder to keep than any business deal he'd ever negotiated, but as he watched his daughter stack blocks with determined focus, David knew it was the most important commitment he'd ever make. 3 weeks into their new reality, David Carter discovered that being present was harder than building a billion-dollar company. I can't just disappear, he said into his phone, pacing the length of his home office while trying to keep his voice down. Naomi was having her first session with Carmen Rodriguez, the art therapist Patricia had recommended, and Simone was working from home to be nearby. The Singapore deal will fall through without you here, his CFO Mike pressed. We're talking about $200 million in revenue. David looked out the window at his backyard, where Grace was reading a book in the garden. 4 weeks ago he would have been on a plane within the hour. Now the thought of leaving made his stomach turn. Then we find another way to close it. Video conference. Send Henderson. I don't care. David, what the hell is going on? You've never? My daughter is more important than Singapore. The words came out sharp, final. Handle it, Mike. That's why I pay you. He hung up before Mike could respond, then immediately felt the familiar anxiety creep up his spine. What if the deal really did fall through? What if investors lost confidence? What? Daddy? He turned to find Naomi standing in the doorway holding a piece of paper. Her session had ended early. How'd it go with Miss Carmen, baby girl? Good. I made you something. She held out the paper shyly. David knelt down to take it and his breath caught. It wasn't like her other drawings. This one showed two figures, a tall man and a small girl, both smiling, both clearly together. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, Daddy and me. This is beautiful, sweetheart. Can you tell me about it? Miss Carmen said to draw something that makes me feel safe. Naomi looked up at him with eyes that held less fear than they had a month ago. You make me feel safe now. David had to clear his throat before he could speak. You make me feel safe too. Really? Really? You know what I realized? All those years I was working so hard to take care of you, I forgot that you take care of me too. You make me remember what's important. Naomi beamed and threw her arms around his neck. Over her shoulder, David saw Simone watching from the hallway, tears in her eyes. Later that evening, after Naomi was asleep, David and Simone sat on their back deck with glasses of wine. The first time they'd done that in over a year. Carmen says Naomi's making remarkable progress, Simone said. The art therapy is helping her express feelings she couldn't put into words. She drew us together today. Both of us smiling. I know. She showed me. Simone smiled softly. She told Carmen that Daddy doesn't disappear anymore. I won't. I can't. David set down his wine glass and looked at his wife. Simone, I need to tell you something. I'm restructuring everything. What do you mean? The company. My role. Everything. He'd been thinking about this for days, the idea growing stronger with each of Naomi's small improvements. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. Promoting Jennifer to CEO. I'll stay on as chairman, but my involvement will be limited to strategy sessions and quarterly reviews. Simone stared at him. David, that's a massive change. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. I built that company to give our family security, but what's the point of security if there's no family left to secure? The board will fight you on this. Let them. I still own controlling interest. David's smile was grim. Besides, the company will be stronger with Jennifer running operations. She's been doing most of the real work anyway while I've been flying around the world making speeches. And you're okay with that? With stepping back from something you built from nothing? David looked through the window at Naomi's bedroom, where a soft nightlight glowed. No screaming tonight. No nightmares. Just peaceful sleep. I didn't build it from nothing, he said quietly. I built it on the foundation of your support, your sacrifice, your willingness to hold our family together while I chased dreams. And I almost lost everything that actually mattered. Simone was quiet for a long moment. I wasn't perfect either. I threw myself into work too, especially after we started having problems. Those long shifts, the emergency surgeries I could have handed to other doctors. I think I was hiding too. From what? From facing the fact that we were falling apart. It was easier to save other people's children than to deal with our own family crisis. They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in thought. Finally, Simone spoke again. Patricia wants to start couples counseling next week. I know. I already cleared my calendar. Simone looked surprised. Just like that. Just like that. David squeezed her hand. I'm done making excuses. I'm done putting anything ahead of this family. If we're going to heal, really heal, we need to do the work. All of it. All of it. As if summoned by their conversation, Naomi's voice drifted down from upstairs. Not a scream this time, but a sleepy call. Mommy? Daddy? They looked at each other and smiled, the first real smile they'd shared in months. Coming, baby girl, they called together, heading upstairs to comfort their daughter. But for the first time in weeks, Naomi wasn't having a nightmare. She was simply checking to make sure they were both still there. I love you, she whispered sleepily as they tucked her in. We love you too, David replied, and realized that love, real love, wasn't something you could buy or earn through achievement. It was something you had to show up for, day after day, in all the small, unglamorous moments that actually mattered. His phone buzzed with what was probably another crisis from Singapore. He turned it off without looking. The call came on a Tuesday morning while David was making Naomi's lunch, something he'd never done before but had somehow become his favorite part of the day. Mr. Carter? This is Evelyn Brooks, Naomi's principal at Westfield Academy. David's hand tightened on the phone. Is everything okay? Is Naomi hurt? She's fine physically, but I'm calling because we've had an incident. Could you and your wife come in this afternoon? David looked at the clock. 2 months ago, he would have sent Simone alone or asked if they could reschedule around his conference calls. Today he didn't hesitate. We'll be there at 2. An hour later, David and Simone sat in Mrs. Brooks' office, a warm space filled with children's artwork and family photos. Mrs. Brooks was an elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. "Tell us what happened," Simone said, her doctor voice in place, calm, professional, prepared for bad news. Naomi had a panic attack during lunch. She was sitting with her friends when another child mentioned that her parents were traveling to Paris for vacation. Naomi became very agitated, asking if they were coming back, if they were sure, if something might happen to them. David felt the familiar guilt twist in his stomach. "She started hyperventilating," Mrs. Brooks continued gently. "Her teacher, Mrs. Kim, brought her to my office and we called you, but your assistant said you were in meetings and couldn't be disturbed." "That's not," David started, then stopped. His assistant probably had said that. It's what she'd been trained to say for the past 15 years. "I'm sorry. That won't happen again. I've changed my emergency contacts," Simone added. "David will be the primary contact during school hours. I'm often in surgery and can't leave immediately." Mrs. Brooks nodded approvingly. "Good. But I want to discuss something else. Naomi told me that you've been home more, Mr. Carter, and her teacher has noticed significant improvements in her behavior and academic performance over the past month." "She has." "Oh yes. She's participating more in class, her artwork has become much more positive, and she started engaging with other children again. Whatever changes you've made at home are working." David and Simone exchanged a look. It was the first concrete evidence that their efforts were making a real difference. "However," Mrs. Brooks continued, "I want to make sure we're supporting her properly here at school. Children with anxiety often need additional accommodations." "What kind of accommodations?" Simone asked. "Permission to call home if she's feeling overwhelmed. A designated safe space in my office if she needs to calm down. Perhaps a buddy system with a trusted classmate." Mrs. Brooks leaned forward. "The goal is to give her tools to manage her anxiety, not to make her feel different or limited." "That sounds wonderful," David said. "What else can we do?" "Actually, there's something I'd like to propose. Naomi is incredibly bright and creative. She's been working with our art teacher on a project about families, and her work shows real insight. I'd like her to participate in our school student showcase next month." "A showcase?" Naomi's small voice came from the doorway. They turned to see her standing there with the school secretary, her backpack clutched in both hands. "Naomi, sweetheart," Mrs. Brooks said with a warm smile. "Your parents and I were just talking about how proud we are of your progress." "I heard you say showcase. What's that?" "It's an evening where students share projects with their families," Mrs. Brooks explained. "You've been working on that beautiful series about what family means to you. Would you like to show it to other people?" Naomi looked uncertain. "Will Mommy and Daddy both come?" "Both of us," David said firmly. "We wouldn't miss it. Promise?" "I promise, baby girl. Nothing will keep us away." Naomi's face lit up with a smile that reminded David of why he'd fallen in love with being a father in the first place. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, another new tradition, Naomi chattered excitedly about the showcase. "Mrs. Kim says my drawings tell a story about how families can heal when people start paying attention to each other instead of other things." "That's very wise," Simone said. "And Tommy's mom asked if you're really not traveling anymore, Daddy, because Tommy's dad travels all the time and Tommy wishes he would stay home more." David set down his fork. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that my daddy learned that being rich means having your family close, not having lots of money far away." The simple wisdom of it hit David like a physical force. Out of the mouths of babes. "You're absolutely right," he said quietly. Later, as they got Naomi ready for bed, she pulled out her latest drawing from art therapy. This one showed their whole family, David, Simone, Naomi, and Grace, standing together in front of their house. But what made David's throat tight was that in the picture, they were all holding hands. "Miss Carmen says this shows that I'm learning to trust that people can stay," Naomi explained. "Even when they go to work or the store or wherever, they come back because they want to be with me." "That's exactly right," Simone said, kissing the top of Naomi's head. "We always want to be with you. Even when I have scary feelings?" "Especially then," David said. "Scary feelings are when you need us most." As they tucked her in, Naomi looked up at both of them seriously. "I'm not scared about the showcase anymore." "No? Why not?" "Because I know you'll be there. Both of you. Together. It was such a simple statement of faith, but David knew how much courage it had taken for his daughter to believe in their promises again. Walking downstairs, he and Simone moved automatically to their new evening routine. Decaf coffee on the back deck, talking through the day, making plans for tomorrow that actually included each other. "She's healing," Simone said softly. "We all are," David replied and realized it was true. Somewhere in the middle of choosing his family over Singapore deals and emergency phone calls, he'd started healing too. His phone sat silent on the kitchen counter, and for the first time in his adult life, David Carter was exactly where he wanted to be. The family therapy session that changed everything happened on a Thursday afternoon in Patricia's sunny office. David sat on the comfortable couch with Simone on one side and Naomi curled up between them, her latest art therapy creation spread across the coffee table. "I want to try something different today," Patricia said, settling into her chair. "Naomi, you've been working so hard on expressing your feelings through art. Would you be willing to show your parents some of your pieces and tell them what each one means to you?" Naomi nodded eagerly. Over the past 6 weeks, her confidence had grown remarkably. The shy, anxious child who used to cling to David's leg now spoke up clearly in these sessions. "This one," she said, pointing to a drawing of a house with 3 windows, "is from when I was scared all the time. See how the windows are all dark? That's because I thought nobody was home." David's chest tightened. The drawing was dated just 2 months ago, but it felt like a lifetime. "And this one," Naomi continued, moving to another drawing, "is from when Daddy started staying home more. The windows have light in them because people are inside." "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Simone said, her voice thick with emotion. "But this is my favorite," Naomi said, pulling out a large piece of paper that David hadn't seen before. "I made it yesterday." The drawing showed their family, but this time they weren't just standing together. They were building something. A house, with each family member holding different tools. David held a hammer, Simone held nails, Grace held wooden boards, and Naomi held a paintbrush. "We're building a new house," Naomi explained. "Not with money or fancy stuff, but with love and staying together and keeping promises." Patricia leaned forward. "Can you tell us more about this house you're building? It's strong because everybody helps. And nobody can leave unless they tell everyone where they're going and when they're coming back. And there are rules." "What kind of rules?" David asked. "Like Daddy can't answer his phone during dinner. And Mommy can't go to the hospital unless it's a real emergency. And I have to use my words when I'm scared instead of just crying." David looked at his daughter with amazement. "Those are very good rules. Miss Carmen helped me think of them. She says families need rules so everyone feels safe." Patricia nodded. "Naomi, you've done incredible work identifying what you need to feel secure. Now I want to ask your parents something." She turned to David and Simone. "Are you both willing to commit to these rules?" "Yes," Simone said immediately. David hesitated, not because he didn't want to agree, but because the weight of the commitment felt enormous. "What if there's a real emergency at work?" "Then you tell us about it," Naomi said matter-of-factly. "You say, I have to go help with something important, but I'll be back at this time. And then you come back when you say you will." "It's about communication and predictability," Patricia added gently. "Children with anxiety need to know what to expect." "I can do that," David said and meant it completely. "There's something else," Naomi said, pulling out one more drawing. "This one was different, messier with darker colors. This is from my nightmare. The one I used to have every night." The drawing showed a little girl standing in an empty house, calling out to no one. At the bottom, Naomi had written, "Where is everybody? But I don't have this dream anymore," she continued proudly. "Want to know why?" "Why?" Simone asked softly. "Because even when I'm sleeping, I know where everybody is. Daddy's in his office or his bedroom. Mommy's at the hospital helping people or sleeping next to Daddy. Gamma Grace is in the guest room reading her books. And if I wake up scared, I can find all of you." "That's right," David said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're all right where we're supposed to be." Patricia smiled. "Naomi, I think you've just shown us something very important. You've moved from a place of fear, worrying about who might leave, to a place of trust, knowing where everyone is. That's huge progress." After the session, as they walked to the car, Naomi skipped ahead while David and Simone followed more slowly. "She's not the same child who was screaming in her sleep 2 months ago," Simone observed. "No, she's not. But neither are we." David stopped walking and turned to face his wife. "Simone, I need to tell you something. The business restructuring is official. Jennifer takes over as CEO next month. How are you feeling about that?" "Relieved," David said, surprising himself with the honesty. For the first time in 20 years, I wake up thinking about what my family needs instead of what the market's doing. It's liberating. And scary? Terrifying, he admitted with a laugh. I've been defined by that company for so long, I wasn't sure who I'd be without it. And now you know? David looked ahead at Naomi, who was spinning in circles on the sidewalk, her face tilted up to the sun. Now I know I'm a father. A husband. A man who almost lost everything that mattered because I was afraid of not having enough. Enough what? Money. Success. Security. He shook his head. But Naomi was right in that drawing. We're building something new now. Something that can't be bought or sold or lost in a market crash. That evening, as David helped Naomi with her homework at the kitchen table, his phone rang. Without looking, he sent it to voicemail. "Daddy, you can answer it," Naomi said, looking up from her math worksheet. "It's homework time. Phone time is later." Naomi beamed. "You're following our rules." "I made a promise," David said simply. Later, after Naomi was asleep, David finally checked his voicemail. It was Mike, his CFO, calling with news about the Singapore deal. "David, you're not going to believe this. The delay actually worked in our favor. Their original terms were garbage, but waiting gave them time to reconsider. We got everything we wanted, plus a 10% bump in the partnership percentage. Jennifer's negotiating skills are incredible. Who knew that not being desperate actually strengthens your position?" David smiled, saving the message. He'd call Mike back tomorrow during business hours from his office. Tonight belonged to his family. He found Simone in their bedroom, reading medical journals by lamplight. "Good news from Singapore," he said, climbing into bed beside her. "Oh, the deal went through. Better terms than we originally hoped for." "That's wonderful." She looked at him curiously. "You don't seem as excited as I'd expect." "I'm excited, but not because of the money." David settled back against his pillows. "I'm excited because it proves we made the right choice. The company doesn't need me micromanaging every decision. It needs good leadership and clear vision, and Jennifer provides both." "So what will you do with all your free time?" David grinned. "Learn to paint. Naomi wants to teach me for the showcase. Apparently, my contribution to the family art project needs work." Simone laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her in months. "I'd like to see that." "You will. We're all going to be there together just like we promised." As they settled into sleep, David listened to the sounds of his house. Not the empty silence that used to greet him on business trips, but the full, warm quiet of a home where people loved each other and planned to stick around. Tomorrow he'd work on his painting skills. Tomorrow he'd attend Naomi's therapy session. Tomorrow he'd have dinner with his family and help with homework and tuck his daughter into bed without a single nightmare. Tomorrow he'd continue building the life that actually mattered. For the first time in years, David Carter fell asleep not thinking about what he might lose, but about everything he'd gained by choosing to stay. The night of Westfield Academy's student showcase, David Carter stood in front of his bathroom mirror adjusting his tie for the 5th time. Not because he was worried about investors or board members, but because his 8-year-old daughter had specifically requested that he wear the blue tie that makes your eyes look nice. "Daddy, are you ready?" Naomi called from downstairs, her voice bright with excitement instead of anxiety. "Almost, baby girl." David took a deep breath, looking at his reflection. 3 months ago, he'd been a man who measured success in quarterly reports and stock prices. Tonight, his biggest concern was whether the painting he'd made for Naomi's family project would embarrass her in front of her classmates. Downstairs, his family was waiting. Simone wore a soft yellow dress that made her skin glow, her natural hair styled in loose curls. Grace had driven over for the occasion, elegant in navy blue, her camera ready to capture every moment. And Naomi, beautiful, brave Naomi, spun in circles wearing her favorite purple dress, the one she picked out specifically because it makes me feel like I can do anything. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," David said, kneeling down to her level. "Do you think people will like our project?" "I think people will love it because it tells the truth about our family." "What truth?" David considered the question seriously. "That families can heal. That love is stronger than fear. And that sometimes the best thing you can build isn't a business, it's a home where everyone feels safe." Naomi nodded solemnly, then broke into a grin. "Also that you're getting better at painting but still need lots of practice." "Hey now," David laughed, standing up. "My trees are perfectly good trees. They look like green cotton candy on sticks." "Naomi," Simone said, trying not to smile, "be nice to Daddy." "It's okay," David said, taking Naomi's hand. She's not wrong. But they're trees made with love, and that's what matters. The drive to school was filled with chatter. Naomi explaining her presentation, Grace asking questions about the other students' projects, Simone quietly holding David's free hand across the center console. It felt natural, normal, like the kind of family moment David had been too busy to notice when they happened before. Westfield Academy's gymnasium had been transformed into an art gallery. Student work covered every wall, and small crowds gathered around each display. The energy was warm and celebratory, parents and grandparents moving from project to project with pride and curiosity. There's my display. Naomi pointed to a corner where several of her drawings were mounted on a large poster board. David's breath caught when he saw it fully assembled. The progression was clear and powerful, from those early dark drawings of empty houses to the final piece showing their family building something beautiful together. In the center was the painting David had contributed, a clumsy but heartfelt rendering of their backyard, with 4 figures sitting around a picnic table under a tree whose branches definitely looked like green cotton candy. Mr. and Mrs. Carter? They turned to find Mrs. Brooks approaching with a warm smile. I'm so glad you could both make it. We wouldn't have missed it, David said, meaning every word. Naomi has been looking forward to this for weeks. She's very proud of her work, and she should be. But more than that, she's proud of her family. As if on cue, Naomi appeared at David's elbow with a boy about her age in tow. Daddy, Mommy, this is my friend Marcus. I told him about how you learned to stay home and paint terrible trees. Nice to meet you, Marcus, David said, shaking the boy's small hand seriously. And my trees aren't terrible, they're abstract. Marcus studied David's contribution to the family project. My dad travels a lot too. For work. Maybe you could teach him about staying home. The innocence of the question hit David in the chest. You know what, Marcus? Maybe you could give him my phone number. I'd be happy to talk to him about what I learned. Really? Really? As the evening continued, David found himself in conversation after conversation with other parents. Many of them dealing with similar struggles between career ambition and family life. He shared his story openly, the successful business, the absent father, the screaming child who forced him to reevaluate everything. How did you make the transition? Asked one mother whose husband was frequently overseas. Wasn't it terrifying to step back from something you'd built? Terrifying, David admitted. But you know what was more terrifying? The thought of succeeding at everything except the things that actually mattered. Meanwhile, Naomi moved through the showcase like a confident young artist, explaining her work to anyone who would listen. David watched her point to different drawings, her face animated and happy, with no trace of the anxiety that had once consumed her. She's remarkable, Patricia Lewis appeared beside him. She'd been invited as a special guest, having worked with several of the students. She is. But then she always was. I just had to slow down long enough to notice. And the family? How are the sessions going? Better than I hoped. We're actually talking to each other. Planning things together. Building something new. David smiled. Simone and I start couples counseling next week. I'm glad to hear it. Naomi talks about both of you constantly, how daddy makes pancakes now, how mommy reads stories at bedtime instead of just on weekends. Consistency has been everything for her. When it came time for Naomi to present her project to the gathered crowd, David felt his heart swell with pride. His daughter stood confidently in front of the microphone, her voice clear and strong. My project is called How Families Heal, she began. I made these pictures to show what happened when my family was broken and how we fixed it together. She walked through each drawing, explaining the emotions and experiences behind them. When she got to David's painting, she grinned. And this is my daddy's first painting. He's not very good at trees yet, but he's very good at being here with us. Sometimes the most important thing isn't being perfect, it's being present. The crowd burst into applause, but David barely heard it over the thundering of his own heart. His 8-year-old daughter had just articulated the most important lesson of his life. After the formal presentations, as families mingled and enjoyed refreshments, David found himself standing with Simone and Grace, watching Naomi play with her friends. Look at her, Grace said softly. Really look at her. David did. Naomi was laughing, running, playing tag with children she'd been too anxious to approach just months ago. Her movements were free and joyful, unburdened by the constant fear that had once defined her days. I almost missed this, David said quietly. I almost missed watching my daughter become who she's meant to be. But you didn't, Simone said, slipping her hand into his. You chose to stay. You chose us. Best decision I ever made. As they prepared to leave, Naomi ran over with her arms full of compliments from classmates and teachers. Mrs. Brooks approached with a special certificate. For outstanding artistic expression and personal growth, she read aloud, handing it to Naomi. You should be very proud. I am, Naomi said, beaming. But mostly I'm happy. On the drive home, as Naomi chattered excitedly in the back seat and Grace shared her photos from the evening, David felt a peace he'd never experienced at any board meeting or product launch. His phone buzzed with what was probably another business emergency. Without hesitation he turned it off. Daddy? Naomi said from the back seat. Will you help me make another painting tomorrow? I want to paint our whole family together. I'd love that, baby girl. We'll paint the best terrible trees you've ever seen. Naomi giggled. They'll be perfect because we'll make them together. And David realized that was exactly right. Perfect not because they were flawless, but because they were made with love, patience, and the commitment to keep showing up for each other. That was the only success that truly mattered. 6 months after the night that changed everything, David Carter sat in Dr. Rebecca Martinez's office holding his wife's hand and marveling at how foreign the gesture had once felt. I want to talk about trust today, Dr. Martinez said, settling into her chair across from them. Simone, you mentioned last week that you're starting to believe David's changes are permanent. Can you tell me more about that? Simone squeezed David's hand. It's the small things. He's been home for dinner every night for 6 months. He's never missed one of Naomi's therapy appointments. When I had that emergency surgery last week, he rearranged his entire schedule to be with Naomi without me even asking. How did that feel? Like I could finally breathe, Simone admitted. For so long I felt like I was carrying everything alone. The parenting, the worry, the responsibility for Naomi's emotional well-being. Having a true partner again, it's changed everything. Dr. Martinez nodded and turned to David. And how has this shift affected you? Honestly, I feel more successful now than I ever did running a billion-dollar company. David's voice was thoughtful. Success used to mean market share and profit margins. Now it means Naomi sleeping through the night. It means Simone laughing at my jokes again. It means we're building something that can't be destroyed by economic downturns. But surely there are moments when you miss the intensity of your old life? David considered this. Sometimes. But then I remember what that intensity cost me. Naomi's panic attacks. Simone's tears. My own isolation. He shook his head. I was addicted to the adrenaline of closing deals and forgot that the biggest deal of my life was the one I made at the altar. Speaking of which, Dr. Martinez smiled, tell me about your renewed commitment to each other. David and Simone exchanged a look. One of those wordless communications that only couples who've weathered real storms could share. We're planning a vow renewal, Simone said. Nothing big or fancy. Just us, Naomi and Grace in our backyard. But we want to mark this new beginning officially. And Naomi's excited about it? She's designing the invitations, David laughed. Apparently we need more flowers and definitely better trees in the decorations. That evening they found Naomi in her room working on homework. A sight that no longer filled David with guilt about missing dinner or bedtime stories. These were his hours now, this was his presence, and nothing felt more valuable than helping his daughter with math problems. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always, baby girl. Tommy's parents are getting divorced and he's really scared. He asked me how I got my daddy to come home. What should I tell him? David set down the pencil he'd been holding and pulled Naomi onto his lap. What do you think you should tell him? That sometimes grown-ups forget what's important, but that doesn't mean they don't love their kids? That's very wise. What else? Naomi was quiet for a moment, her face scrunched in concentration. That kids aren't broken when families have problems. And that healing takes time, but it can happen if everyone wants it to. David felt tears prick his eyes. Those are perfect things to tell Tommy. Can we have him over for dinner sometime? I think he needs to see what a happy family looks like so he knows it's possible. Of course we can. Later, as David and Simone sat on their back deck, their evening ritual now established and protected, Simone brought up something that had been on her mind. David, I've been thinking about reducing my hours at the hospital. Really? Why? Because I want to be here. Not just physically but emotionally present. I realized I was using work to avoid dealing with our problems just like you were. She leaned back in her chair. I want to go into private practice. Family medicine maybe. Something that lets me help people without sacrificing our family time. What would make you happy? This, Simone gestured between them toward the house where Naomi was getting ready for bed. This life we're building. I want to protect it, nurture it. I spent so many years fixing other people's children's hearts that I almost let our own child's heart break. But you didn't let it break. We caught it in time. We did. And now I want to make sure we never come that close to losing each other again. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint their backyard in shades of gold and pink. David's phone was inside, turned off until morning. Simone's pager was in her purse, silent unless the hospital needed her for a true emergency. I have something to tell you, David said. Jennifer called today. The company's quarterly numbers are the best they've ever been. How do you feel about that? Proud of Jennifer. Validated in my decision to step back. David smiled. And grateful that I finally learned the difference between building wealth and building a life. Daddy? Mommy? Naomi's voice called from upstairs. I'm ready for story time. They looked at each other and grinned, another evening ritual that had become sacred. Coming, sweetheart, they called together. As they headed upstairs, David caught Simone's hand. Thank you, he said. For what? For not giving up on us. For fighting for our family even when I was too stupid to see what mattered. Thank you for coming home. For really coming home. They found Naomi in her pajamas, 3 books already selected for their bedtime reading. Her room was full of new artwork, bright, happy scenes of family picnics and birthday parties and ordinary moments that had become precious because they were shared. Which book first? Simone asked, settling on one side of Naomi's bed while David took the other. The one about the little girl who learned to be brave, Naomi said without hesitation. As Simone began to read, David looked around his daughter's room and realized that the scared, anxious child who used to wake screaming was gone. In her place was a confident, joyful little girl who knew she was loved, who trusted that her parents would be there when she needed them, and who was learning that families, real families, don't abandon each other when things get difficult. Daddy, Naomi whispered as Simone finished the story, I'm not scared of the dark anymore. No? Why not? Because even in the dark, I know where everyone is. And I know that if I need you, you'll come. Always, David promised. No matter what. I know, Naomi said simply, and David realized that her certainty, her complete faith in his presence, was the greatest achievement of his life. As they tucked her in and kissed her goodnight, Naomi smiled sleepily. Tomorrow can we work on your painting skills some more? I think you're ready to try flowers. I'd love that, baby girl. Walking back to their own bedroom, David and Simone moved together easily, naturally, like dancers who'd finally learned each other's steps. Happy? Simone asked as they got ready for bed. David looked out their bedroom window at the city lights, then at his wife's reflection in the mirror, then toward the hallway where their daughter slept peacefully. Happier than I knew was possible, he said, and meant every word. Some success he'd learned couldn't be measured in dollars or market share. Some success could only be measured in the sound of a child's laughter, in a wife's trusting smile, in the deep peace that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged. Tonight, David Carter was the richest man in the world. The morning of their vow renewal ceremony, David woke before dawn not from anxiety or business emergencies, but from excitement. In 8 hours he and Simone would stand in their backyard and promise each other, and Naomi, that this family was permanent, unbreakable, and worth everything they'd nearly lost. He found Grace in the kitchen at 6 a.m., already arranging flowers that Naomi had insisted on picking herself from their garden. Couldn't sleep either? She asked with a knowing smile. Too excited. Is that weird for a man renewing vows with his wife of 10 years? Grace looked at him seriously. David, this isn't the same marriage you had 10 years ago. This is something entirely new that you've built together. You have every right to be excited. I keep thinking about that first night when I came home and heard her screaming. David poured himself coffee from the pot Grace had made. I was so broken, so lost. I had no idea how to be the father she needed. And now I can't imagine being anything else. By 9 a.m. the backyard was transformed. Not with expensive decorations or professional planning, but with the loving touches that made it uniquely theirs. Naomi's artwork hung from tree branches, her hand-painted signs marking the path from the house to the garden where they'd say their vows. David's terrible but improving paintings were displayed proudly alongside professional family photos. At 10 a.m., Naomi burst into their bedroom wearing the lavender dress she'd picked out specifically for the occasion. It's time. It's time. Dr. Patricia is here, and Miss Carmen brought a present, and Mrs. Brooks came with flowers. David looked at Simone, who was putting the finishing touches on her makeup. She wore a simple white sundress that made her look radiant and young, her natural hair crowned with a flower crown Naomi had made in art therapy. "You ready for this, Mrs. Carter?" "I've never been more ready for anything, Mr. Carter." The ceremony itself was small and perfect. Dr. Martinez officiated, having become not just their counselor but their friend. Patricia Lewis and Carmen Rodriguez stood as witnesses, representing the professional support that had helped them heal. Mrs. Brooks came with several of Naomi's classmates and their families, the community that had embraced their story of second chances. But the most important moment came when Naomi stepped forward with rings she'd designed herself. Simple bands engraved with the words, "Always here," on the inside. "Mommy and Daddy," she said in a clear, confident voice that would have been impossible 8 months ago, "these rings mean you promise to stay with each other and with me, even when things get scary or hard or confusing." "That's exactly what they mean, baby girl," David said, his voice thick with emotion. As he slipped the ring onto Simone's finger, David spoke the vows he'd written but hadn't shared with anyone. "Simone, I promise to choose you every day. Not just when it's convenient or profitable or easy, but especially when it's not. I promise to be present, not just physically in the same room but emotionally available for whatever you and Naomi need from me. I promise to remember that success isn't measured in dollars, but in the strength of the love we build together." Simone's vows were equally heartfelt. "David, I promise to trust you with my heart again. To believe in the changes you've made and the man you've become. I promise to be your partner in building the life we both want, not just for ourselves but for our daughter. I promise that our family will always come first, no matter what challenges we face." When Dr. Martinez pronounced them renewed in marriage, the cheer that went up from their small gathering was genuine and joyful. But David barely heard it over the sound of Naomi's delighted laughter as she threw flower petals in the air. The reception was held on their back deck, with catering from Naomi's favorite restaurant and a playlist she'd curated herself. As guests mingled and shared stories, David found himself in conversation with Tommy's father, Mark. "Naomi told Tommy that families can heal if everyone wants them to," Mark said. "My wife and I have been in counseling for 2 months now, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For showing us it was possible. For proving that successful men can choose their families without losing themselves." Mark's voice was earnest. "I flew home from a conference in London yesterday just to be here today. 6 months ago, I would have sent flowers and made excuses." David clapped him on the shoulder. "How's Tommy handling things?" "Better. Having Naomi as a friend has been incredible for him. She's taught him that it's okay to talk about scary feelings, and that parents can learn new ways to love their kids." As the afternoon wore on, David watched his daughter work the party like a confident hostess, introducing her friends to her family, showing off her artwork, explaining to anyone who would listen how families could heal if they worked really hard and got help from people like Dr. Patricia and Miss Carmen. "She's remarkable," Patricia said, appearing at David's elbow. "Do you know she asked me last week if she could help other kids who were scared about their families?" "Really?" "She wants to volunteer to talk to children who are starting therapy. She says she wants to show them that kids can get better and families can become happy again." David felt pride swell in his chest. His daughter hadn't just healed from her trauma, she transformed it into a desire to help others. As the sun began to set, guests gradually departed, but not before sharing hugs and promises to stay in touch. The little community that had formed around their family's healing had become something precious and lasting. Finally, only Grace remained, helping them clean up while Naomi played in the garden, still wearing her party dress but now with grass stains on the hem. "I'm proud of you," Grace said quietly to David as they collected empty plates. "When Simone first brought you home 15 years ago, I saw a driven young man with a good heart but wrong priorities. Today I see a man who knows what really matters. Thank you for not giving up on me. For being here when Naomi needed you most." "Family shows up," Grace said simply. "That's what we do." That evening, after Grace had gone home and Naomi was finally in bed, still buzzing with excitement about the best day ever, David and Simone sat on their back deck surrounded by the gentle chaos of a celebration well enjoyed. "I have something for you," Simone said, pulling out a small wrapped box. Inside was a leather-bound photo album. The first page showed a picture from their original wedding day, young, optimistic, naive about the challenges ahead. The last page showed a photo from today, older, wiser, scarred but stronger. In between were pictures chronicling their journey: Naomi's birth, David's business successes, family vacations where he'd been constantly on his phone, Simone's medical school graduation, birthdays where work had kept him away, and finally the recent pictures. Family dinners, art projects, bedtime stories. Ordinary moments that had become extraordinary because they were shared. The story of us, Simone said. All of it. The good and the bad and the beautiful. We almost didn't make it, David said, studying a particularly painful photo where Naomi was clearly crying while he talked on his phone in the background. But we did make it. And we're stronger now than we ever were before. You know what I realized today? David set the album aside and pulled Simone closer. I used to think love was something you felt. Now I know love is something you do. Every day. In small ways and big ways. It's a choice you make over and over again. And what do you choose? You, Naomi. This life we've built. Every day for the rest of my life. As they sat together in comfortable silence, David's phone buzzed inside the house. An urgent email from the Singapore office, no doubt, or a crisis that someone thought required his immediate attention. For just a moment, David felt the old familiar pull, the addiction to being needed, to being the one with all the answers. Then he heard Naomi's voice drifting through her bedroom window as she talked to herself while settling into sleep. And they all lived happily ever after because they learned that love means staying together even when it's hard. David smiled and made no move toward his phone. Some things he'd finally learned were more important than urgent. Some things were just important, period. 2 years later, David Carter stood in the wings of Westfield Academy's auditorium watching his 10-year-old daughter address an audience of parents, teachers, and children about resilience, healing, and the power of families who choose to fight for each other. When I was 8, Naomi said into the microphone, her voice clear and confident, I was so scared that everyone I loved would leave me that I couldn't sleep at night. I had panic attacks and nightmares and I thought something was wrong with me. David felt Simone slip her hand into his as they listened to their daughter, now a 5th-grade student ambassador and peer mentor, share her story with the kind of wisdom that only came from lived experience. But I learned that feelings aren't facts. Just because I felt scared didn't mean I was in danger. And just because my family was having problems didn't mean we couldn't fix them. In the audience, David spotted several familiar faces. Patricia Lewis, who still met with Naomi monthly for what they now called check-ins rather than therapy sessions. Carmen Rodriguez, who had become more friend than art therapist as Naomi's emotional regulation skills flourished. Mrs. Brooks, beaming with pride at the student who had transformed from anxious and withdrawn to confident and compassionate. The most important thing I learned, Naomi continued, is that healing happens when people decide to show up for each other. My daddy learned to put away his phone during family time. My mommy learned to trust that change could be real and permanent. I learned to use my words when I'm scared instead of keeping my feelings inside. David thought about the journey that had brought them here. 2 years of consistent family dinners, bedtime stories, therapy sessions, and the 1,000 small moments that had rebuilt their foundation. 2 years of David running his company remotely when possible and never missing a school event. 2 years of Simone building her private family practice, finding the perfect balance between helping other families and nurturing her own. Now I get to help other kids who are scared, Naomi said, gesturing to a group of younger students sitting in the front row. I tell them that families can heal, that kids aren't responsible for grown-up problems, and that asking for help is brave, not weak. The applause was thunderous, but David barely heard it. He was remembering that first terrible night when Naomi's screams had shattered his world and forced him to confront what he'd become. The man who had answered that scream barely recognized the father he was now. After Naomi's presentation, the family gathered in the school courtyard with friends and community members who had become extended family through their healing journey. I'm so proud of you, baby girl, David said, sweeping Naomi into a hug. You were amazing up there. Did you see Tommy in the audience? He brought his dad and they've been going to counseling for 6 months now. His mom says they're like a different family. David looked across the courtyard to where Mark stood with his son, both of them laughing at something Tommy had said. The transformation in their relationship was visible. The same kind of healing that had happened in David's own family, rippling outward to touch other lives. That's because you showed them it was possible, Simone said, joining their embrace. You planted seeds of hope in people who didn't know families could change. We all did, Naomi corrected. Remember? Families heal when everyone does their part. That evening, as they settled into their familiar routine of homework help and dinner preparation, David reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed. The kitchen that had once been a showpiece rarely used was now the heart of their home, filled daily with conversation, laughter, and the comfortable chaos of a family who genuinely enjoyed being together. Daddy, Naomi said as she worked on a math problem, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if our family would be willing to be interviewed for a magazine article about family therapy success stories. What do you think about that? Naomi considered it seriously. I think if it helps other families find hope, we should do it. But only if they promise to include the part about how you still paint terrible trees. Hey now, David protested, but he was laughing. My trees have shown significant improvement. They've improved from what is that supposed to be, to, oh, that's clearly a tree, Simone added with a grin. That's real progress. You're both very mean to me, David said, but his heart was full. This kind of gentle teasing, this easy affection, had been missing from their family for years. Now it felt as natural as breathing. After dinner, as they walked through their neighborhood, another new tradition that had emerged from their commitment to spending unstructured time together, David found himself thinking about legacy. You know what's funny? He said to Simone while Naomi ran ahead to pet a neighbor's dog. I used to worry constantly about what I'd leave behind. What kind of empire I was building, whether the company would survive without me, if I'd be remembered as successful. And now I realize I am building a legacy. Just not the kind I thought. David watched Naomi laugh as the golden retriever licked her face. That little girl is going to grow up knowing she's worthy of love, that families don't abandon each other, that healing is possible even after deep hurt. She's going to choose partners and raise children from a place of security instead of fear. And she's going to help other people do the same, Simone added. Did you know she wants to be a family therapist when she grows up? She says she wants to help scared kids and their parents find their way back to each other. David felt tears prick his eyes. His daughter's trauma had been transformed into purpose, her healing into a calling to help others heal. We broke the cycle, he said quietly. We did. The generational patterns of absent fathers and anxious children end with us. That night, as they tucked Naomi into bed, she made an announcement that surprised them both. I don't need bedtime stories every night anymore, she said. I mean, I still like them, but I don't need them to feel safe. I know you're both here, and I know you'll be here tomorrow. Are you sure? Simone asked. We love story time. I know. But maybe we could do stories 3 times a week, and the other nights we could just talk about our day and what we're excited about tomorrow? David marveled at his daughter's emotional intelligence. She was recognizing her own growth and advocating for what she needed, skills that would serve her well for the rest of her life. That sounds perfect, he said. What do you want to talk about tonight? I want to know if you're happy, Daddy. Like really, truly happy. The question was asked with the directness that only children possessed, and David took it seriously. 2 years ago, I thought I was successful, but I wasn't happy. I had money and recognition and achievement, but I was lonely and scared and empty inside. He smoothed Naomi's curls. Now I have less money, less recognition, less achievement by traditional standards, but I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. Because of me and Mommy? Because of you and Mommy, and because I finally learned what success really means. It means being the person the people you love can count on. It means showing up even when it's hard. It means choosing love over fear, connection over achievement, presence over presence. Naomi nodded solemnly. Miss Carmen says the best gift you can give someone is your attention. Miss Carmen is very wise. Are you going to keep being happy? David looked at Simone, who was listening with tears in her eyes. I'm going to keep choosing the things that make me happy, which means choosing you and Mommy every single day for the rest of my life. Good, Naomi said with satisfaction. Because I like you much better happy than stressed. As they kissed her goodnight and turned off the light, Naomi called out one more time. Daddy? Thank you for learning how to stay. Thank you for teaching me how to be your father, baby girl. Later, David and Simone sat on their back deck under a sky full of stars, reflecting on the miracle of their transformed life. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come home early that night? Simone asked. I try not to think about it, David admitted. But sometimes I do, and it terrifies me. We were so close to losing everything. But we didn't lose it. We found it. We found each other again, and we found ourselves. David's phone was inside, turned off for the night. His laptop was closed. His attention was fully present with his wife in their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built through intention and commitment and love. I love you, he said simply. I love you too. All of you. The driven businessman and the devoted father and the man who paints terrible trees but keeps trying anyway. They're not terrible anymore. They're charmingly amateur. They're terrible, Simone laughed. But they're made with love, and that makes them perfect. As they headed inside for the night, David paused in Naomi's doorway. His daughter slept peacefully, completely, without fear or anxiety or the crushing worry that had once defined her nights. Her room was filled with artwork that told the story of their healing, from dark, empty houses to bright, full homes bursting with color and life and joy. On her nightstand was the latest drawing she'd made, their family of 3 plus Grace, standing together under a rainbow. At the bottom, in her neat handwriting, were the words, "Happy Ever After." Not happily ever after, David noticed, but happy ever after. Present tense. Ongoing. A choice they made every day. He turned off her night light, knowing she no longer needed it to feel safe, but leaving it on anyway because some comforts were worth keeping. In his own bedroom, as he settled next to Simone, David thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago. Successful by every external measure but internally hollow. A father in name only, a husband in legal terms only, a man who had everything except what mattered most. That man would barely recognize the life David lived now. Smaller in scope but infinitely richer in meaning. Quieter but filled with the kind of deep satisfaction that no business deal could ever provide. "Sweet dreams," Simone whispered, already half asleep. "Sweet dreams," David replied, and meant it. For the first time in his adult life, David Carter fell asleep not planning tomorrow's conquests or worrying about tomorrow's challenges, but simply grateful for today's blessings and confident that tomorrow would bring more opportunities to love and be loved in return. Outside, the city hummed with the ambitions and anxieties of millions of people chasing success as David had once defined it. Inside their home, a family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had found the only success that truly lasted, each other. The scream that had once shattered David's world had ultimately saved it, teaching him that sometimes you have to break completely before you can rebuild into something beautiful. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very willing to change, you get to write that better story with the people you love most. David Carter had learned to paint terrible trees, but he had mastered the art of being present. And that, he knew, was the greatest masterpiece of his life.